The Earth is home to remarkable sights where life is intimately connected to mysterious freshwater springs. These natural sources form a vital link with the surface. They nourish the Earth and maintain life. Florida harbors an aquatic empire of unparalleled magnitude. It conceals mysterious labyrinths in its depths, where blue gold wends its way over long journeys. An exploration of this fragile hydrologic system will reveal the importance of understanding its workings to better protect it. The 1,000+ springs here have given birth to a constellation of canals, rivers, and marshes. They foster the well-being of numerous species. Every day, 30 billion liters of water gush from the subsoil to feed this complex aquatic network. The Floridan aquifer system extends all the way to South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama. It spreads over more than 260,000 square kilometers, equivalent to twice the size of the United Kingdom. In the heart of the peninsula, water doesn't simply flow from one waterway to another. A shy and unpredictable phantom, it snakes into the dark and unexplored recesses of the Earth. Professor Robert Knight, founder of the Florida Springs Institute in Gainesville, has roamed this savage terrain for the past 40 years. According to him, each spring is like a window onto the aquifer.
The aquifer is full of mysteries. It is dark. When you go into the aquifer, even in this clear water, you cannot see what's underground unless you go in as a cave diver. So there are so many passages that have never been explored. There are so many chambers that have never been seen by humans that it's an extremely exciting mystery. It's like going to the bottom of the ocean or going to the stars. It's unknown.
What makes these springs unique isn't so much what they show us as what they're hiding.
Ain't that the truth? Wait a minute. All right, now. Okay, you are hooked up.
For several years, biologist Tom Morris and his colleague Mark Long have regularly explored the maze of arteries that burrow into the depths, hidden from human eyes. The health of these springs is a major concern for Florida because they've been fragilized by human activity, excessive groundwater pumping, and pollution. Exploring a hydrologic system that's in constant evolution is a perilous adventure. For the moment, no one has managed to plot the entire system, which means there's no updated map. Subject to water pressure and the dissolution of limestone, this underground world is in perpetual movement. Fissures form, opening new and uncharted pathways that the aquanauts attempt to catalog. It takes a lot of experience and the latest equipment to glide through these vertiginous cracks, because the dynamics of the water are unpredictable. At a depth of 30 meters, their progress is slowed by the currents. A simple ribbon enables the divers to estimate the current's strength and evaluate the dangers. The Floridan aquifer system is composed of several aquifers. These permeable geological formations are made up of a multitude of cavities and tunnels leading to a series of basins. The tremendous quantities of fresh water that accumulate in these reservoirs can lodge hundreds of meters underground and several kilometers from the spring itself. Less than 50 meters below, multiple layers of limestone attest to the geological memory of this aquifer. These porous rocks date back to the Eocene epoch, 35 million years ago. Tom Morris believes that the springs in Florida are interconnected. The slightest problem, the slightest complication in one sector of the underground system can have repercussions several dozen kilometers away. But identifying and monitoring all these waterways will take more time.
Oh, that was so long. We saw a lot of new cave. Did you get the survey all down on that one spot, that new passage?
Yeah, I got it all. Some interesting mixing of water going on back there.
Yeah, I think the river must be rising, but that was very cool. I can't wait to get all this stuff off. Many of these caves interconnect as far as the movement of water goes, but they made the connections may be too small for a diver to go through. Today we discovered some new galleries. We went into a side passage no one had ever seen before. It's very important to know what's going on underground in Florida as far as the water is concerned. When I was a boy, there were 1 million people in this state, and now there are 20 million people. And we're using more and more water, and we're actually kind of drawing the aquifer down during periods of drought. Some of our springs have quit flowing altogether. And that's a very new thing, and it's very troubling.
The depletion of the springs could have serious repercussions. In the depth of winter, when outside temperatures can drop into the negatives, spring water provides warmth that many species depend upon. In December and January, strange aquatic mastodons take refuge here. Fleeing the cold waters of the Atlantic coast and the Gulf of Mexico, where they spend the summer, these manatees have begun their migration. They'll travel upstream along the winding waterways beneath cypress trees covered in Spanish moss to reach the springs. These mammals can live in both freshwater and saltwater because their organism can brave all variations in salinity. Surprisingly, however, their layers of fat aren't thick enough to withstand temperatures below 20 degrees Celsius. Water below 15 degrees would prove fatal to them.
The temperature of the water in Florida is generally the same year-round, and it mirrors the average temperature of the environment, which around here is about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The springs are critical habitat for all of the animals. They depend on that environment. They cannot live outside of that environment.
Buried under the sand, layers of limestone provide strong insulation, ensuring a constant water temperature throughout the year. In some spots, manatees huddle up and squeeze together, forming groups of more than 200 individuals. At Crystal River, the most popular thermal resort, it's pandemonium. Generally nomadic and solitary, these Subterraneans have grown accustomed to this place. Winter after winter, they enjoy returning to this spring to which they've become attached. This rubbing does more than satisfy an itch. It also allows the females in heat to spread their scent, signaling their receptivity to the males. Rubbing up against one another, touching, or kissing provides physical contact that is vital for recognizing one another or provoking new encounters. Each natural spring comes from the simple marriage of hydrogen and oxygen. Born of drops of water fallen from the sky, sometimes several kilometers from where it rises to the surface. The water cycle starts at infiltration points, places where the ground is permeable. During the rainy season from June to October, a portion of the precipitation rushes into the rivers and streams. certain spots, it's absorbed by sandy soil. Elsewhere, the water infiltrates the limestone rock. Over the course of weeks, months, or centuries, the water will travel through this stack of friable, soluble, or porous rock, sculpting stunning landscapes. When the subsoil becomes saturated, the underground flow of water creates pressure and seeks paths to the surface. These fortuitous springs were already very popular several million years ago. Over time, layers of sediment and limestone piled up, creating a veritable geological and archaeological layer cake. At a depth of 60 meters, Tom Morris and Mark Long continue their exploration of one of Florida's most productive aquifers. It is estimated that the first springs formed 55 million years ago. In this maze of galleries, prehistoric animals found themselves trapped. The fossils that remain here provide precious clues to assess the date when the aquifer was formed.
Could you believe that?
That was nice.
That
nice
was
school.
You don't see that every day.
No, you don't.
Man,
What was that?
I'm pretty sure that was a giant ground sloth.
I've never seen one of those in these springs.
They're so bizarre looking. They were all over Florida, certainly back 4 million years. And they were probably still here 13,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, when we had the extinction of the great Pleistocene mammals in North America.
I can't believe there's been so many divers past that and never seen it before.
You know, it must have just got uncovered.
Yeah.
That's all I can think.
These springs are really dynamic, changing all the time like that, with stuff getting uncovered and covered back up.
Yeah, and you know, when Florida was drier, back in the Pleistocene, a lot of these springs were sinkholes. And so they were kind of like death traps. These animals would fall into them, they couldn't get back out. See how that sloth got in there. They refer to those big animals as the Pleistocene megafauna, the big animals. The fossils tell an important story, and they tell us what it used to be like here in Florida and what kind of animals roam the landscape.
With the passing years, spring water has sculpted rivers, lakes, and ponds, without which today's fauna could not thrive. As with the manatee, this region's springs are a crucial stopover for millions of migrating birds. 200 species from the Great North have traversed Canada before reaching Florida. These travelers will mingle with ibis, snowy egrets, and other sedentary birds. The Florida Peninsula is located on one of the biggest migratory highways on the North American continent. Near the coastlines, the place where the water from the spring meets the ocean has given birth to numerous marshes and mangroves. In these protected zones, several million water birds can nest and regain their strength. Beyond the coastal bar, water from the springs nourishes the lush vegetation. This jungle also provides protection, warmth, and food for many terrestrial species. Within these impenetrable bayous, marsh deer and raccoons can wander around unseen and unbothered. Meanwhile, these reptiles, numb from the chill of winter, enjoy the warmth of a few rays of sunshine. Each spring is unique and possesses its own color palette. At winter's end, the translucent waters that gush from below mingle with the reddened hues of the Santa Fe River. Professor Robert L. Knight likes to venture into the middle of these forests, where Florida's most secluded springs are hidden. Mr. Springs, as he's nicknamed, is capable of making a diagnosis in a single glance. He also knows the provenance of these incredible hues.
The Santa Fe River is a blackwater river, a southern blackwater river that has dark color because of tannic acids that come from the leaves of the cypress trees. The blue water is the very pure water that comes from the whole spring shed over hundreds of square kilometers of land where rainfall percolates into the groundwater. When the two come together, they make different colors. It's almost the yin and the yang of water, if you will.
High water temperatures and the accumulation of dead leaves caused by weak currents provoke their decomposition and the acidification of the water. Nevertheless, near the springs, the water remains limpid.
The color is so important in springs because it's a sign of a healthy spring is a very, very clear water. And the importance of clear water for springs is that it allows light to reach the plants, which provides the food for all the fish and the birds that use the springs.
During its long voyage back to the surface, the water has slithered between many layers of rock and sand. It has passed through filters that have removed all impurities. These crystal waters have encouraged the development of aquatic gardens. They are bursting with fish, amphibians, and turtles, most of them endemic species. The carpet of algae offers the famous Florida turtle nourishment and numerous hidey holes.
It's absolutely essential that springs remain clear and have that abundant amount of clear water flowing in to keep back the forces of the rivers like the Santa Fe River.
Most blackwater rivers are found in the warm and humid woodland zones of the southern United States, or the Amazon region. They slowly ferry enormous quantities of nutrients, bacteria, and minerals conducive to life.
That all the springs in North Florida are interconnected through the groundwater. That water can be compared to blood, the blood in an organism. And the heart of North Florida is the Florida aquifer. So the analogy to blood is also similar through the veins of the aquifer that transmit this water, this clean water throughout North Florida and to our springs.
How many more veins and arteries does this gigantic subterranean organism hide? No one really knows. Its secrets are well guarded. Perhaps the creatures capable of slipping inside this deep labyrinth have the answer. Such as the alligators that have colonized the whole of this vast humid zone and move freely from one spring or river to another. The banks at the foot of these great cypresses are the personal hunting grounds for these predators that are always on the lookout for prey. Unlike the manatee, the American alligator is a permanent resident. This monster, which can reach up to 4 meters and weighs 450 kilos, lives exclusively in fresh water and can only tolerate salt water for very brief periods. As strange as it seems, these two giants have learned to ignore each other. Only very young manatees whet the alligator's appetite, but aggressions are extremely rare. Equipped with a powerful caudal fin, these lazy sirenians can reach speeds of 25 kilometers an hour. Their two back limbs act as a rudder in these aquatic prairies. Thanks to their prehensile lips, which allow them to scoop up food, these formidable marine herbivores that weigh an average of 500 kilos can ingurgitate about 10% of their weight per day. That's almost 50 kilos of aquatic grasses. Their cecum and intestine, which is 45 meters long, facilitates the fermentation and the digestion of cellulose fiber, thus producing large quantities of gas. This flatulence, as a matter of fact, helps them maintain their buoyancy. In winter, when the night chill bears down on the waterways, these animals, which are sensitive to the cold, gather near the hot water springs. They sleep lightly because they have to wake themselves up to breathe at regular intervals of 3 to 30 minutes. In January, most of the manatees have deserted the Gulf of Mexico. Attendance at the springs reaches record highs. Until the beginning of spring, these waters offer calves complete security and the tranquility they need to grow before making their way to the coast. To nurse their newborns that measure 1 meter 20 and weigh 30 kilos at birth, mothers have a mammary gland under each fin. This one isn't even weaned yet, and already a cohort of suitors pursues its mother. But when the time comes, she'll choose one, and sometimes more. The Three Sisters Springs generate the Crystal River and welcome the largest assembly of manatees in Florida. One can observe up to 400 individuals here. But it's also the site that bears the most pressure from humans. Seduced by this enchanting landscape and the crystal clear waters, property developers have built willy-nilly. From now on, the manatees must contend with boat propellers as well as water pollution that endangers their health.
We have a manatee, a cow-calf pair right here, just under the surface, a very young calf.
The manatee, are the main priority for the spring experts because they are sensitive to change and to pollution. They provide invaluable information about the state of the environment in which they live. They are a bioindicator species. Robert Bond is a veterinarian and a professor at the University of Florida. For 37 years, he's been compiling a gigantic data library.
But they do have to come to the surface to breathe and get air. So that's what makes them vulnerable to the boats.
By comparing photographs from year to year, he knows almost everything about these manatees.
All manatees would look alike, but these manatees have scars, and the different scar patterns allow us to go in and re-identify the individual. So we can keep track of which manatees are surviving and which ones are not coming back to the population. We'll take blood, we'll take tissue samples, we'll take stable isotopes, we can do analysis, we can determine what that manatee's had for breakfast. So biomarkers are real good because that's how the system is responding to toxins and contaminants and other things internally. They're not only a pride and a joy, they're a sentinel species. So we can actually look at what their diet was and how that diet has changed over time. And we know that the environment has changed over time. In the last 10 or 20 years, the plants have changed in Kings Bay and in Crystal River. And now we have introductions of other species of algae like limbia and other things that manatees are having to incidentally forage on and feed on. So what's the cost associated with that?
In recent years, limbia, a harmful algae, has proliferated on the surface of these limpid waterways. It thrives on the pollution from nitrates that grow in the region. The spread of this invasive algae tends to mushroom when the flow from the springs dwindles, which affects the strength of the river currents. The limbia covers the riverbed and little by little floats to the surface, entrapping duckweed that in turn deprives the subaquatic ecosystems of light and thus suffocates them. Without photosynthesis, organic matter cannot regenerate, and life disappears. This chaos does not seem to affect a certain primitive fish, the Lepizosteus, also known as the long-nosed gar. This long, bony fish is amazingly well adapted to wide variations in oxygen levels in the water, because it can rise to the surface and grab some air when oxygen levels run low. Lepizosteus are also well equipped for weightlessness. A hypervascularized and gassy swim bladder acts like a lung. When it decides to venture down into the depths, this fish simply deflates its bladder to vary its buoyancy, much like the stabilizing jackets that divers use. This peculiar adaptation allows the gar during the winter months to remain completely immobile at the bottom of the water, rising to the surface neither for air nor for food. Few species are capable of living in the dark depths of the aquifer. Tom Morris and his colleague Mark Long avidly research this fascinating aquatic fauna. Identifying and cataloging new species also gives these experts the means to evaluate the health of the springs. Devil's Den at Ginny Springs, located north of the peninsula, is a unique site for exploration. Here, life has made its way into the abysses. Fish, a few turtles and crustaceans, will at times venture into these recesses. But they don't stay long. Unlike the Cory catfish or the albino crayfish, better adapted to darkness. This crayfish that's made its home in an abandoned grotto seems to particularly pique the researchers' interest. In this complex environment, removed from any source of light or vegetation, nothing stops the life force. Crayfish have the ability to regenerate their limbs when they molt, a capacity that allows this biologist to remove only one tiny claw as a sample, because he'll release the specimen after examining it in the light of day. A DNA study will enhance knowledge about these species, some as yet unidentified.
We got one.
That's great.
After all these years, we finally got some crayfish out of here. Every little bit of information that we collect on these animals goes a long way, and all these little bits and pieces come together so we can write the life history of these animals, where they occur, how abundant they are, what specific habitats that they require. All the things that we need to know to protect these animals so that they can exist on into the future. If it's a new crayfish, well, we've just written the first chapter, right? Discovering the animal is the very first thing, and then the description. And these beautiful little animals have diversified nicely in Florida, and we suspect there are more species to be found. Heck, maybe this is one of them.
The flow of the water in the aquifer is essential to the survival of subterranean ecosystems. The currents ensure the transport of microorganisms and bacteria, and thus provide nourishment to crustaceans and certain fish. But in recent years, a decrease in hydric activity has jeopardized this fragile balance. Attaining higher quality groundwater requires permanent surveillance of the spring's activity. Professor Chris Anastasiou is the director of the Springs Experts. One of his many missions is assessing water clarity in order to restore ailing or contaminated ecosystems. With his colleague Susana Martinez, he measures the range of visibility of the water.
133.
133? That's pretty good.
These clear waters appear healthy, but they can dissimulate pollution that's invisible to the naked eye.
This river, the Rainbow River that we're on, is very unique in the sense that we have very high levels of nitrate. Nitrate is a form of nutrient. It's an inorganic form which is commonly found in things like fertilizer, but it also comes from other sources like septic tanks and wastewater plants. But if you look at the river, especially the upper part, it's some of the clearest water in the world. So it goes against the idea that more nutrients means less clear water. In this case, we have very high nutrients, but we have very clear water. And so that begs the question, why? And really the answer is twofold. One is the enormous amount of flow that comes out of the springs that make up the Rainbow Springs group. So there's a lot of velocity. The river is flowing very fast. The other is all the grass that you see here in this river. The grass is really important to maintaining good water clarity, even in the face of high nitrates. But that doesn't mean it's not a problem.
A strong nitrate concentration accelerates the proliferation of invasive algae that suffocate the aquatic ecosystems. The nitrate pollution and the suffocation of the ecosystems are not the only troubles that the region has to endure. The strong demographic pressure and the excessive use of water for leisure activities and agriculture have provoked an alarming drop in water levels in the aquifer. In the past several years, another exacerbating element has hit the Floridan aquifer system. In certain locations, the sharp decline in the spring's flow has made it impossible to prevent the tides from entering the rivers. As a result, salinization of the waterways has increased, threatening the flora as well as the fauna. To make matters worse, this phenomenon is amplified by rising ocean levels. The springs experts have observed that in some areas, the water is 30% saltier than it was 30 years ago. To reverse this startling situation, biologists and experts have outlined several strong countermeasures. Chris Anastasiou has undertaken a vast project for growing floating seagrass mats. They'll serve to replace the original grass that has been damaged by the salinization of the water. He has therefore developed nets made from coconut fiber. These will be used as supports for a species of eelgrass that is particularly resistant to salt, Vallisneria americana, or water celery.
They're very useful from an ecological standpoint because they provide habitat and they provide food for very important species like manatee. They're also very important because they help clean the water. And so the clarity in places like Kings Bay and other spring systems within the Springs coast has been reduced over the years. And a large part of the reason why these systems aren't as clear as they used to be is because we lost a lot of the vegetation. And so this is a way to bring back the vegetation. In the face of things like sea level rise, the Vallisneria or eelgrass is well suited to environments where the salinity is a little bit higher than other plants. So we also think that these grasses will do well in a future that's likely to be much saltier than it is today.
No other region in the world can boast as many springs. Unaware of efforts by the springs experts to safeguard their environment, manatees must venture further and further inland. These bioindicators must travel greater distances each year to find springs with pure, crystalline waters. After several years of drought, the springs experts count on an abundant rainy season to replenish Florida's springs. During the subtropical summer, rainfall of diluvian quantities should douse the region. Without this rain, movement within the Floridan aquifer system could weaken and the springs could run dry, imperiling the unique array of fauna and flora. The Florida springs are exceedingly vulnerable. They continue to sustain a singular natural environment, such as these cypress forests, where wild fauna have found a final refuge.